This guy that's in front of you right now is Frank Ferragini, aka Frankie Flowers, four-time best-selling garden author. Family own and operate two garden centers, one in Bradford, one in Barrie, called Bradford Greenhouses Garden Gallery. I'm on a mission out there to motivate people to get out there and to garden and to help you go through the journey of gardening. And I try to get on here at least once a week to answer your garden questions. But the same token, the people that hop on here also are fantastic because they can actually help us answer your questions as well. So if you have a question about gardening, no matter if you're watching us this evening on Facebook, let's say that you're on LinkedIn, let's say that you're watching us on YouTube, or possibly even on X, formerly known as Twitter, just post in one of the your question into the comments section, and that way I'll be able to share some of that information with you all out there. A good friend of mine, longtime person that has actually been watching the Garden Q&A. Paula Polly is on here this evening. Good evening to you, Paula Polly, as well. A couple things that I want to talk to you about. First, I want to talk to you about the start of summer. Of course, summer officially arrived on Thursday, the summer solstice that was just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But did we have summer-like conditions last week, where we had temperatures last week in the 30s with Humidex values almost into the 40s and on many days into the 40s? As well, what we had with that heat and humidity is we did have significant amount of rainfall. One day we saw 50 millimeters of rain at Pearson, and this is in Southern Ontario. Of course, you could be watching us right across the country, but in Southern Ontario, it has been hot, humid, and wet, and that means the perfect recipe out there for disease. So just to kind of give you an indication of some of the things that you could be seeing and some of the things that I've seen, I've already spoken about this on my garden at home here, my peonies, that is. One thing that we can be seeing is powdery mildew on peonies. Just a reminder that powdery mildew on a peony is that almost silver looking or whitish dust that would look like on the foliage. Good news is that powdery mildew really doesn't necessarily harm the plant. Bad news is it's fairly unattractive. The good news is really there's not much you can do during the growing season, but what we can do is in the fall is cut all this back and try to discard any of those leaves that are there and try to actually remove them and not even put them in the compost. The other thing that we can do is actually try to thin out the garden, create more air circulation. And then also sometimes powdery mildew is a sign of overfeeding. So if you actually add too much nitrogen, but once again, it doesn't harm the plant. So I wouldn't be overly concerned when it came to powdery mildew. Another thing, because it's been hot and humid, one thing that you could be seeing out there as well is you may be seeing and noticing on some of your leaf lettuce, some of your red leaf, your green leaf lettuce, that with all this heat and humidity, they could be bolting. And here's a good image right there of what it looks like when lettuce bolts. And that basically is where it's going to flower and or seed. And this happens because lettuce is a cool temperature plant. And as soon as it feels like it's under stress, or actually it's near the end of the season where we would actually have those hotter conditions, that's when you'll actually see it bolt. As soon as it bolts, those lettuce leaves start to taste extremely bitter. And probably what most likely you should do is pull or cut down that bolted lettuce and then even to reseed and or to replant. So those are some of the things that you should be watching out for. And those are some of the questions that I have. Speaking of questions as well, actually we got some already popping up here as well this evening. So I just want to give a quick shout out there this evening to Michelle. I want to give a shout out to Matthew Amos. Hello there, buddy, as well. And we're going to get to our first question right here. Susan Rose. Good evening. This question may seem ridiculous. There's never a ridiculous question, especially after the weather we've just had. Summer months, is watering my roses of Sharon and Jillian necessary every day, or can just rely on rainwater? Can you give me some watering tips? So because we've been seeing a significant amount of rain, we really don't need to water, unless sometimes some of the plants that we have, especially our hanging baskets, they could be underneath an area that's covered, or even sometimes underneath certain trees. You'll be noticing not the water, not the rainfall is getting there, but rainfall is just as good, if not the best way that plants can be receiving water, as long as they're not getting too much rain or too often. So if we have a rainy day, you don't have to water the next day. You may have to water the day thereafter. Depends on the size of the containers. When it comes to Rose of Sharon, after the week that we've seen, I probably wouldn't water till the end of this week if we don't see any rain. So that's not a bad question. It's a good one. We got Diane here as well. Once the flowers are done on your peonies, do you do anything to the plant? What you should be doing is removing that flower stem right back to where you see the leaves are branching out. So just cut off the bloom, which is deadheading, removing this flower stem to where the leaves branch out. That way we're going to put more energy back into the plant, back into the roots, and also be able to have a bigger, better plant for next year as well. So that's a good question out there as well. She's saying, sorry, use voice to text may not make sense. Voice to text is a fantastic thing, and sometimes it doesn't make sense out there as well. Matthew Amos has a little comment. Can you tell Karen Siolan to email to ask for autographs? So he's always asking for autographs. And the other thing is too, is for those that don't know me well, each and every morning you can see me live on breakfast television where I forecast the weather, and I always get really passionate about plants that are out there as well. So some other things I want you to watch out for, because we have had a fairly wet and warm, humid little period here, is slug populations most likely are going to be fairly increased. So let's say that you're starting to see holes in your plants, especially in hostas or in shaded gardens, probably a pretty good indication that you have slugs. There are slug baits that are available. You can also put diatomaceous earth around the base of those plants. The diatomaceous earth around the base of this plant can be anything from crushed shells, eggshells that is, or even crushed, let's say you were eating mussels or clams, you could be doing that, or you can purchase diatomaceous earth. There are slug baits that are available. All the slug baits that are available on the market right now that you would see for retail sale at garden centers and home improvement store are all Health Canada approved, so they're all safe to children and pets that are out there as well. One of the keys to reduce slug populations, like so key, is to make sure that you water in the morning. Watering at night or having a wet garden at night will increase slug populations, and that's some of the things that are happening out there. Also, we got Tanya, my good friend. Thrips and aphid are showing up already as well. Indeed, Tanya, because we have been so hot, so humid. I'm seeing red spider mite all over the place. So now we got to be aware. We got to take the time to go out there in our gardens and keep an eye out for insects like aphids. Let's say that we see ladybugs on our plants. Well, they could be eating aphids. So even if you see ants on other plants outside of a peony, usually it's a sign of aphids, because the aphids, when they eat, they secrete a honeydew. If we see aphids on the plant, and let's say we don't know what to do, just take a high pressure hose, wash them off. And then you can use an insecticidal soap like Bug B Gone to take care of that problem as well. We got another question here from Christina. Hi, Frankie from East York. How are you? We have a serious problem with little flies every spring from our houseplants. How do I resolve this once and for all? They're annoying little buggers. Those little buggers, most likely, if they're small flies, are most likely fungus gnats. Fungus gnats are a result of overwater, tend to being too moist of soil and decaying leaves. So first step that we can do is for those indoor plants, cut back on your watering, allow to dry in between watering. Super healthy for the plant. Any fallen leaves that are around the base, I want you to clean those all up. And then also what I want you to do is just to dust a little bit of the soil, the top of the soil, with cinnamon powder, and you'll be remarkably surprised at how that will reduce that population of fungus gnats. The other thing you can do is purchase yellow sticky strips. Those yellow sticky strips could be put in the base of the plants, and the adult stage of the fungus gnat will actually fly and stick on it, and that will reduce the amount of eggs that are going to be laid as well. We got Diane Loff has a question. What are your thoughts about clover on your lawn? Should we leave it or do something with it? And that's really a matter of personal preference. Clover in a lawn is completely fine because it's green. It actually does fairly well in some areas that are tough where lawns can grow, specifically in shade. It actually can put nitrogen into the soil. It's soft to walk on, and generally you cut it before it goes into bloom. However, if you want that perfect golf course lawn, then you actually have to remove the clover. Removing clover, you can use Weed B Gone, that'll kick it back a bit, but really the best way to remove clover is hand removal and then patching with sod or even overseeding in those areas. Just to let you know, as we talk about lawns this last week, I didn't cut my lawn. Actually, if you were to look at my lawn right now, my grass is pretty tall. I left my grass tall during that hot period of hot weather to shade the roots, to keep it a little bit cooler, and they'll also just maintain a little bit of moisture if we had a little bit more dry period. So in hot weather, we want to be always our lawn to be a little bit longer. Cooler conditions, it's going to cool down tomorrow to a daytime high into the mid to low 20s. I'm going to cut my lawn tomorrow, and I'm going to cut it at an appropriate height. Good comment here too. Clover is great for dog owner lawns because it actually can take a little bit more abuse that's out there. The only challenge with clover for a dog owner is establishing that clover. It takes a little bit of time that's out there, but that's a good one as well. Will cinnamon help with white fly with white mold. No, it won't happen with my white mold. That white mold in the soil sometimes might even be mold, but that white substance that you would see on the top of the soil of your indoor plants often can actually be the salts in the water of your indoor plants. We got another comment here from my good friend Paula. My neighbor has offered me some of her fern peonies. Very expensive to buy. Can they be split? If so, when is the best time to do this? Thank you, Frank. So the fern peonies, let me just make sure that they're peony dividing. I don't know if that's a tree peony. I just got to look up here. Cutleaf fern peonies may be peony plants nearly to the ground after the foliage dies. In fall, don't dig and divide fernleaf peonies. The plants don't appreciate being disturbed, and they'll grow in the same place for many years. So this is one where a fern peony, depending upon the size, and that's what I had thought, it's most likely going to benefit more from propagation through a cutting than what it would from a division. So even if you were to take a picture of that plant, Paula, and send it to me, I could take a look at the size of the plant and whatnot and give a couple other suggestions as well. But that's a herbaceous type of peony, which is a wood and or tree form peony. The traditional peonies that we've often seen in our gardens, those are the ones that can be easily divided. Another question from Samantha. Hi, Frankie. We were gifted black-eyed Susans. Any thoughts before we plant them? Black-eyed Susans are a perennial plant, as long as it's a perennial variety, that grow great in full sun. They will reseed themselves. So if you want to put them in a garden where you need to fill it up and thicken it up, that's a really great plant. But if it's a garden that's kind of tight for space and you don't want, if you're planting the black-eyed Susan and you see it sprout, other little seeds have fallen sprout, just keep on top of it. If not, it can become a dominant plant in the garden overall as well. Carol Jones has a question. My hydrangea tree transplanted last fall will bloom this year, only leaves right now. Yes, it should bloom this year. Your hydrangeas, your PG hydrangea trees, if it was a standard PG or maybe it was a standard fire and ice, those guys right now, the buds are just forming because they bloom on new wood. They will be blooming more so towards mid-July because we're a little earlier this year, but often they're usually near the end of July into August for the bloom period for those. We have Marie. Hi, Marie. I found green little worm creatures in my new rose bush. All my leaves are being eaten. What can I do? So if they are a worm, they're actually a caterpillar. And if that's the case, then you would spray something called BTK. You could also use Bug B Gon to kind of treat them as well, but you do have to treat with an insecticide. A reminder, insecticides that you see for sale right now, those are all Health Canada approved, and they all fit within the cosmetic pesticide ban we have in the province of Ontario and many provinces right across Canada. Sometimes when you're buying online, those may not be Health Canada approved and can actually be toxic. But once again, for little worms, one of the best products is BTK for you to use out there. We got another question here, and this is Sibonia Hines. Hi, Frankie. My tomatoes are drooping after the heat wave, even though I water them. They're in containers on my balcony and usually do really well. Can they recover? They will recover. Just like us, when it comes to that first heat wave, how it's like excessively hot because we're not acclimatized to it. You could also see those tomatoes do that same appearance where they're actually drooping over. Don't overwater them. Please do not overwater them because, of course, we had lots of rain, but they're in containers. But they can actually have heat stress. So that's a sign of heat stress now that we're in cooler conditions. Allow them to dry slightly in between waterings, and they should rebound back quite nicely. We got Tracy. Hey, Tracy. Obsessed with peonies, myself as well. Did my last one yesterday using pink Hawaiian coral peonies. Sad this season is done. And that's why we're obsessed with peonies, is because it is a season. And they're here only for a short period of time, and then they're gone. But they are loved and adored. Next up, what do we have that we can look forward to? Dahlias, of course, fantastic. We're going to have some beautiful zinnias that are going to be popping up in our gardens as well. And then as well, we'll have the hydrangea season that's just starting up right now too, which is fantastic for locals. Maria is saying thanks. Thank you as well. And we got Tracy that says, hi, Frank, by the way. A couple other things that I wanted to talk to you about too. So I want to show you guys, where are we here? I want to show you something. So what is happening right now? I'm looking right out my window, and in my window, I have my trough gardens, which my vegetable plants are planted in. In my zucchini plant last week with the heat, the humidity exploded. It is massive. And now we have zucchini blossoms. And this is a season, we're just talking about peonies and things that you got to take advantage of. Something else, if you haven't tried this and you're growing zucchinis this year, I would love for you all to try this. And these guys here, I'm going to do this recipe on one of my Instagram reels, but these guys here are stuffed zucchini blossoms. It's such a simple recipe where you're going to be stuffing the zucchini flower. So we're going to remove the zucchini flowers, and we'll have multiple zucchini flowers on our plants, and we should be removing some because we want not too much production out there and also to have healthy production. So we remove some of the flowers. Those flowers, then what we do is we take ricotta cheese, and we stuff it inside the flower. Then what we're going to do is just twist the top of the flower. We dip that flour into a little bit of egg, and then we actually put it into some breadcrumbs. You can use the Italian breadcrumbs, or even if you wanted to, into a little bit of flour, and then you're going to fry them. And these guys here are such a beautiful treat. So if you're growing zucchinis this year in your garden and you want to try something where you see these for sale at the grocery store, you got to try stuffed zucchini flowers. And if you see them on a menu right now at some of maybe your local restaurants and whatnot, you got to try them, man. They are so great. We got another question here. Diane, I emailed you about how it might help my lilies from being eaten by bunnies. Thanks for the info. Very helpful. So of course, bunnies, we got to think about, what they don't like to see, what they don't like to smell, what they don't like to touch, what they don't like to taste. So if we play with their senses, often we can discourage them from coming to a certain area. So there is a product called Animal Be Gone that we can actually spray on the lilies. That Animal Be Gone will leave what's called bitrix. So it's going to leave a really bitter taste on the leaves of any plant. And then if a bunny goes and consumes them, the bunny's going to go, these taste like crap, and they're going to go elsewhere. Another thing we can do is that bunnies are often afraid of owls because owls are a predator. So we can sometimes put up a plastic owl, and that's enough to discourage them from it being in an area, but we often have to move that around to other areas. Something else that we can do is kind of repel them from smell, and something that I've been working with. So I recently had a bunny that was trying to make a nest to lay little baby bunnies right in between some of my vegetable plants. And my concern was that I wouldn't be able to water or work, and it was just not a good area. There's many areas. I live right across from a ravine. There's lots of areas where that bunny should go. So what I did was I actually put some chicken manure, and the chicken manure is a fantastic fertilizer for vegetable plants and even for your lily. But when you put that pelletized chicken manure, and Miracle-Gro has it, and there's a few others that have it as well, the smell, there's a slight odor that comes from it that bunnies just do not like. So those are some things that can help you in the world of bunnies that are out there. Teresa, I planted marigolds and basil as companion plants for my tomatoes. So once again, basil can actually help repel aphids on tomatoes. And some feel that planting basil close or within the same proximity as a tomato can improve flavor. Marigolds have traditionally always been planted around a vegetable garden to keep rodents like bunnies and things away, and also help with insects. The marigolds are obviously doing their job because they have not been they have been eaten bare. So far, nothing has touched the tomatoes or basil. Any thoughts on what could be eating the marigolds? So what could be eating the marigolds could be if a bunny's hungry enough, they'll actually snap the heads off of a marigold. Marigolds are actually edible flowers that are there, but also what could be eating them is earwigs. So what I would recommend for you is to get up early in the morning one day, or even in the evening when the sun sets, and even at night, go out there with a flashlight, turn it on, and see what's in the garden. If you're not seeing anything during the day, often it could be an earwig. And speaking of which, I'm just going to pull this down here. I recently just did a little bit of a video. I'm going to show you this guy too. For those that are maybe not on my Instagram or Facebook, maybe you're watching on Twitter or whatnot, that right there is an earwig trap that you can see right there. So that's just really a newspaper roll that you can roll up and put into an area like your garden. And then that gets into be an earwig trap, because what happens is earwigs are nocturnal. As soon as the sun comes up, they want to go hide somewhere where it's going to be dark and also moist. So what you do is those little newspaper rolls, just wet them down. And then as the sun comes up, all the earwigs go in the newspaper roll, and then you can just throw those into the garbage, and you'll get rid of a significant amount of earwigs. Also, I just wanted to give you a little shout out to Judy Graham. And this is what's fantastic about the community that follows me and the community that's on here, is that we always get lots of tips. And I haven't tried this yet, but I'm going to try this. So Judy Graham says, in terms of getting rid of earwigs, she uses equal parts of soy sauce and olive oil in a bowl, which she covers with, I would assume, with saran wrap, leaving a slit in them for them to get in. It really works. So where I would place that bowl is within the plants, and then I put it at ground level, and then yes, indeed. So that's an earwig trap that you can actually take care of them as well. But I will try that out. But you can see here as well, where Sonia is just saying earwig strip my lobelia and my columbine. So once again, those marigolds that we're just talking about could really have been eaten by earwigs very easily there as well. We got Jennifer, and Jennifer has a good question here too. My grape hyacinths foliage never died back, turns yellow or over winter. Is this normal? I know she cut it back once it turns yellow, but mine never does. Is it okay to pull it in the fall when it's still green? To be very honest with you, I would cut them now. There's enough energy that should have been built to the grape hyacinths by this time that we don't need to leave that foliage up. Also, I would tell you that my daffodils, foliage wasn't yellowing at all, so I cut them as well. So there should be enough energy to size up those bulbs right now there as well. We have also Nancy. Nancy's question is, I have an orchid over 10 years old and won't bloom, only 2 green leaves, also a gloxinia that never did bloom for a long time. Finally, did bloom last year, hoping it blooms again. I know it's related to violet, so just spikes. So first off, with the orchids, so once again, most orchid varieties, you need to know the variety of orchid. Most orchid varieties that you see in the grocery store are dendrobiums or phalaenopsis orchids. They're easier to bloom, long bloom periods, and they're the preferred orchid for production of greenhouse growers. So if it's that, generally in order to get them to bloom, you need to stress the plant somewhat, cut back on the watering, almost neglect it for a period of time. And you almost see the yellow, the foliage on the leaf, that leaf there. As soon as it starts to turn a yellowish color, that's when we'll actually start to give it a little bit of water, fertilizer, and that should set the flower spike. If you have deep green leaves on your orchid, you're actually treating it too well. In order for orchids to bloom, we need to stress, and the leaves are the biggest indicator that are out there. If you want to find out more information on getting an orchid to bloom, check out my YouTube channel. Just type in Frankie Flowers on YouTube. You'll see Orchids 101, but as well, take a look at the American Orchid Society. They have a wonderful amount of information that's out there as well. Question that she has here, why do ants go on your potted flowers? So sometimes the reason why ants will be on some potted plants is it's actually the aphids that are there or another insect. So what happens is the insects start to eat away at a plant. In behind them, they're going to secrete a sweet substance like a honeydew. And that's what the ants are feeding on. So often if you see ants on your potted plants, look ahead of the ants and you may see sometimes an aphid can either be green, it can be white, it can be red, almost a brownish tones, but often that's the case that's there. So just to give you a reminder, and then once again, to take care of that, you would be spraying with a Bug B Gon, an insecticidal soap. That's Health Canada approved. We got a recommendation from Tracy too, use a good orchid fertilizer. It might need to be repotted. Is it in bright indirect light? Good questions as well that are there as well. So a reminder too that orchids grow in trees in their native areas. So a lot of the times the air roots are circular important. So those air roots that come out, repotting, if you're going to be repotting an orchid, make sure you use an orchid soil. That'll be a bark-based soil to mimic that being growing on a tree. Also, orchids really benefit from a fan in a room, good airflow and good air circulation that's there as well. Tracy, thanks for those tips as well. And this is the whole idea. It's community, guys, man. We got to share. How do you deter chipmunks from digging holes? You get a cat. No, I'm just joking. Same thing, chicken manure. I've actually had great success with putting pelletized chicken manure over areas where things like chipmunks or squirrels have been digging. Another thing that you can do if this is where you're trying to protect maybe plants that are growing underneath, you can put chicken wire down and then put soil on top of the chicken wire, and that can stop them from digging. Squirrels as well don't like owls, similar to bunnies as well. So sometimes a plastic owl, but you've got to move it around. But once again, try that pelletized chicken manure that's there. Nancy, are the big brown bugs pretty brown color, but on my roses, maybe ticks need to get rid of them? Not going to be ticks, but once again, it'd be neat. Nancy, if you wish, you can send me an email picture of those, frankie@frankieflowers.com, and we'll help you as well. Teresa is saying, thank you, Frankie and everyone. I've seen an increase in earwigs this year. So the reason why we're going to see an increase in earwigs, or possibly you are, a reminder for earwigs to survive, they need decaying wood. So let's say that you have a rotting deck. That's a good area for earwigs to breed. Wood pile. If you have a wood pile in any area, that's also another good area. Wood mulch, also another good area. Wooden fence that's actually rotting as well. Those are all areas. So sometimes getting rid of that habitat will get rid of the earwigs, but because we have been wet and warm, perfect ideal conditions for those earwigs to breed. We got CJ Farrell here. Farnell, forgive me. How do you get rid of fruit flies in the house? So fruit flies, if they are, fruit flies are alcoholics. So you can create a fruit fly trap as well. And sometimes it's just using a little bit of apple cider vinegar, putting it into even like a little Tupperware container, and then actually covering it with saran wrap, putting elastic band around it, poking little holes with a sharp pencil, pump, 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 and that will create a fruit fly trap for you there as well. So the fruit fly traps, just look them up online. But often as well, it's getting rid of the fruit, making sure that if you have any open wine bottles, that's another good area where they actually will attract to as well. Generally in the summer, we don't have as much fruit flies now, but then you'll start to see them later in August. Diane Loft has another question here this evening as well. Once the flowers of columbine are done, what do you recommend to do with the plants? So once again, we are deadheading, removing those flowers. By removing those flowers and the flower stem and just cutting it back to where we see the leaves on that columbine plant, it's going to give more energy back into that beautiful perennial plant. Columbine, if you wish, sometimes you can cut it right to the ground and let it go right back up. Delphiniums, as a matter of fact, after delphinium blooms, cut it right down to the ground, and often you'll be rewarded with a second bloom. Tracy says, Frankie's so full of knowledge. It's just called many hours. Child labor as a kid, working in the garden center, and just being always curious. The thing about myself is I continue to be curious, and by always being curious, that allows me to learn. And so each and every day, I love to learn. And so while I may have a lot of knowledge on many things, I'm always willing to say that I don't know that. In the world of gardening, there's so many new variety of plants, and there's even new species of insects that are coming in. There's new challenges. There's even new trends that people want and don't like. So this is an area, if you want to continue to learn, and I am a lifelong learner, that's out there as well. Linda Brown says, good evening, Frankie. Hope all is well. Very well, as by the matter of fact. Diana says, thanks for all the info you share. Much appreciated. And thanks for joining us here this evening. Okay, another thing that I wanted to remind you guys of, let's say that right now we are growing herbs in the garden. If you are growing herbs in the garden, you need, even if you don't need the herbs, you need to cut them continuously. By cutting them continuously and not allowing them to go to seed, you're going to always get brand new flushes of new green growth, especially on basil and parsley, on oregano, and even on your rosemary. And that fresh new growth will continue to give you flavorful herbs. If you're allowing those herbs to go to flower and go to seed, the plant will become old and the flavor of those herbs won't be as good. So even in the summer months, even when you don't need herbs, always make sure they're not going to flower and not going to seed, just as a little bit of a tip that's out there. We got Caroline, Frankie. Hi, Frankie. Can I cut back the stems of my poppy plants now that they have stopped blooming? Yes, you can cut the stems and you can cut the plant back and let it rebloom out. That's what I would do often, is that after they're done, it's actually the peony plant after it's done flowering. It's not the most attractive plant, and that's why I would cut it down. We got Tracy as a comment there too. Lifelong learning, me too. I love it. There's nothing better than learning, and there's always so much to learn out there. Janice, is it too late to plant zinnia seeds? We're getting a little bit late right now. Zinnia seeds, the germination on a zinnia seed, let me just see here. I think they're 8 to 12 weeks. Germination time. So zinnias will germinate in about 15 days. So 15 days, and then we got to think about, it depends on the variety. Some can germinate as quick as 5 days. Some can take as long as 24 days for germination, just to germinate, just to pop out as a plant. And then for it to get to a mature stage, germination time to flower. So germinate, the first flower, it takes about 2 months after sowing for the first flowers to appear. So let's say that we're going to take 15 days. So that's going to put us into mid-July, and it's going to take 2 months. So that means July to August is 1 month, August to September is second. So if you wouldn't be getting flowering until mid-September, if you were to plant those seeds now. You can store seeds, just put them in a nice, cool, dry, dark space, and they will actually store, and you will still have seeds for next year. So maybe perhaps, and I will also tell you, if you're really wanting zinnias right now, there are a lot of deals right now on plants that are out there as well. I'm going to take one more question here, and that is, we're going to just give a little comment there to my good friend Bill from Utterly Smooth. Hi, Frankie. We're finally getting some rain relief from the humidity. Us here too in Southern Ontario as well. We got Carol. That's actually, give her a little shout out too. My dog loves my yellow begonias. For your information, found out they can be toxic. Begonias can be toxic. It's always important for you to know what plants that you have in your garden. If you have a pet, just to know that if they get curious and they start to actually eat away, that we can be safe overall. One of the, for instance, lilies, almost the entire plant of like an Asiatic lily can be harmful to a pet that's out there. So we're at 31 minutes, guys. My promise to you each and every week is to be on here for 30. I want to wish you all health and happiness, a blooming good week ahead. Once again, take the time to get out there, inspect the garden for disease and insects as we have been, and we are in summer. Now is the time that we need to get our shoulders up and get our elbows out to protect our gardens and also to enjoy it. And if you can, try some stuffed zucchini flowers. You're going to love it. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening overall. Happy Sunday. We'll see you live tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. on Breakfast Television.